Sent out an email. The subject line was, "You have just offended the author audience with this email," quoting a message that I got. So this is a video that brought up some of the important lessons that I didn't dive as deeply into in that email. So first of all, if you haven't seen that email, this video isn't going to make as much sense without reading through it. So check it out first, and I'll post a link to it somewhere here in the description. But the gist of that email was the person was really upset that I started an email with the phrase, "I got a question for you," rather than "I've got a question for you." And they said, "You have just offended the author audience with this email and its disregard for proper grammar." And the funny thing is, they spelled "it's" IT apostrophe S, not realizing or missing their own little grammar mistake there, which is just kind of funny. The comedy writes itself here. So I got some great responses to this, overwhelmingly positive. In fact, all pretty much positive. Some people did appreciate where the critic was coming from, and I totally respect that. I do think it's important to be able to steel man a different type of argument and see where someone else is coming from. And I also got some comments from authors about how they got a laugh out of it. Maybe they felt better about recognizing that, hey, they're probably going to have some critics or trolls or haters or whatever as well. I also got a really thoughtful reply that I wanted to go through because it made me think about some deeper things, life lessons, business lessons about repelling people, how you treat people, how you respond to people, when should you respond to people, how do you respond to them, what's the best approach, and a lot of other things in between. So I'll read the email response that came in, and then I'll break down some of the things that it inspired me to share with you. In this video, I don't know how long it's going to be. It's going to go a little bit in depth because it brought up some deeper topics and some things that I haven't thought about as much that you can apply certainly to your business and really even your life in general when it comes to your relationships with people. So I'll read through it here. "Is that the only lesson you learned through all of this? To be grateful that she is no longer subscribed? Yes, I agree that she was way over the top and insulting you, but you reacted with equal vitriol. Instead, the way I handle potential customers who seem upset, and in your case as an example, is to be humble, thanking her for sharing her perspective on your use of street language that came across as offensive to her, and that it was not the intent." And wraps up with, "You might have gained a loyal customer rather than lose one, or at least she would have no ammunition to use in furthering a negative viewpoint of you." And this last point is really important. I thought it was an important topic to address, this idea of not giving people ammunition. And I'm going to dive deeper into that. I generally agree with that. You a lot of times don't want to respond to someone's negativity with more negativity of your own, which only kind of feeds into it or gives them that ammunition to use. And also working in customer service, which is some of the stories I'm going to share here today, the idea of responding to people with, killing them with kindness, so to speak. A lot of times that's really one of the best approaches you can take to de-escalate a situation. So I'm going to go through, well, why did I maybe not choose that exact approach? What would I recommend or not recommend for you as someone, if you're looking for advice on this situation? I'll say this: you might not want to take the same approach that I took. And why did I even respond at all? These are some of the things that came up. So I'm going to dive into that. First, though, I'll go through this point by point. Is that the only lesson you learned through all of this? To be grateful that she is no longer subscribed? And the answer is no. It's not even so much a lesson as much as a feeling there of recognizing and acknowledging that some people, they're just not a fit. And it's not so much even a place of, some people do this ego posturing thing. And it's not to say I don't have ego or couldn't ever be arrogant or something. I'm sure, it comes up for me as much as anyone. So this is not a chest beating. She's, I'm so much better off without this person on my list. It's not that. It's partly that, maybe in this case. Many times, though, it really is a recognition that, look, this person is better served elsewhere, and I'm better served with a different clientele. It really is about not trying to be everything to everyone, not just because you can't be everything to everyone. It's also recognizing that, as one of my mentors talks about, do you really want to be in a marriage with someone who doesn't want to be in a marriage with you? Don't you want people in your audience who resonate with you, who fit your style? And the flip side, if this person really doesn't jive with my style, then it's better off for them and for their own sanity and sake that they're with someone else. They're following other people. In fact, one of the things I responded to this person with that I didn't include the email was a question: wouldn't you rather, paraphrasing, wouldn't you rather realize you don't jive with someone early on? And so that's one thing to that. And also the idea this is an email marketing lesson for you. I tend to keep emails focused on one core point. So one central theme. There's a lot of other points that we can you can make though. And so that's why I'm glad this was an opportunity for me to go, you know what, I want to go deeper, but rather than turn this into a 5,000 word email, I'm going to do sort of like a podcast type of thing like that. So when you're writing an email, you might keep it centered around a single point to keep the focus, even though you could go off in 20 different directions. And I'll be going off in at least a few different directions in this response video here. So another thing, next part is, yes, I agree that she was over the top and insulting you, but you reacted with equal vitriol. Now, I don't believe I had any vitriol in my response. I'd argue I didn't, because there's nothing I said that was actually critical of the person, right? It's kind of, there's a difference between someone saying, I'm offended, and saying you're offensive, right? One is an expression of personal feelings. The other one is an accusation towards someone. It's that pointing that finger. And my responses to this person were, first of all, yeah, I defile the English language by using conversational writing to watch the grammar fanatic squirm. It's pretty sinister, but quite fun. So that's me being playful, being a bit of a smartass, half serious about it, though. And the person who I sent this to, she actually didn't seem upset by that or by my other response. And so I don't think it was actually the response that I sent there that was upsetting to this person. It was actually the later email that I sent about the grammar police, and I'll come back to that here in a little bit. So to me, I am conscious that I don't generally want to turn right around, and if someone is insulting me, that now I'm going to start calling them names and doing that. Although I do think it's funny when comedians do it. And there is something to be said. If there's some drunk, obnoxious heckler in a crowd, and I've been in crowds like this at comedy shows, and the comedian just rips them to shreds, and I feel it's well deserved. It's very entertaining. And this will come up here in a moment. And I would also argue probably deserved if the person was being, first of all, if the comedian wasn't actually being offensive. It's one thing to call someone out, maybe if they are truly being a horrible person. It's another thing where it's like when someone is just rude or insulting or disrespectful, I do kind of appreciate if someone can turn back around and, let's say, give them a little taste of their own medicine. That said, I generally don't strive to do that. I want to practice some empathy as best as I can. Go, you know what? Maybe this person has had a hard day, a hard life. I don't know what they're going through with all of that. Perhaps I can strive to be maybe just give a little playful response, be a little flippant, or there's other types of responses that I could give that I'll come coming up. Certainly, I don't generally want to turn right around and start calling someone else names, and especially if you're dealing with someone in person. This comes from my customer service background and just life lesson in general. You probably realize that there are people out there who you make them mad, you don't know what kind of horrible things they might do, right? What kind of violence they could resort to. So I generally agree. You don't want to set people off or, necessarily respond with the same type of energy. Although I do, again, I think there is something to be said for the petty response that I might have given would have just been correcting the person's grammar mistake who sent this, correcting her grammar mistake where she said it's disregard with an apostrophe. Sort of like, how does it feel? I wouldn't say this, but sort of, how does it feel when someone overlooks your whole message and just focuses on one little typo or something in there? Now, I can appreciate, though, where some people might say, this critic has a point, right? It's upsetting when some people set a bad example out there. And if people turn to someone for advice or as an expert, and that expert is using, poor communication techniques or poor grammar or spelling and typos and things like that, that could be setting a bad example. And I generally agree with that. To me, it's a matter of degrees. It's a matter of, are they generally good with grammar, but occasionally they use some colloquialisms or they have a little oversight, which can happen to virtually anyone, including the person who sent this email. To what degree is it, right? It's not holding people to this perfectionistic standard, because I also look at examples from this perspective. If I have some slight imperfections in my work, some people say that's setting a bad example. I argue that's setting the example that you don't have to be perfect to make an impact. To me, that's a more important example to show people that it's not about perfection. To tell stories, there's famous authors who weren't the best of spelling and grammar, right? And they still made an impact. And so, or you can have great speakers. They're big TEDx talks, and sometimes the speakers, like I do, sometimes use ums and ahs. Or in California, I picked up probably too many likes in my send, like, it's like this and it's like that, and like all that. Right? California surfer dude, it kind of got that vibe. So you pick some of that stuff up, and the idea here is what's the example of there's different types of examples. The example of imperfect action. That to me is an important example. Another example is how do you treat people, right? You can set an example. You can be technically correct about a grammar issue. My issue with the grammar police, though, is not that they're worried about grammar. I can agree with grammar being important. It's their approach. And in taking an insulting approach, I would say that's not setting a good example as far as just being a decent human being. And also from a persuasion standpoint, it's one of the things that brought up for me is years ago, I kind of a resting a-hole face, right? And I learned to smile a little bit more on video. I remember I would work at events and things, and I'd be like at seminars and stuff, and a lot of times standing in the back of the room. And for some reason, a number of people, sometimes multiple times over the course of a weekend, would come up and be like, "Smile. You should smile. Smile more. You'd look nicer if you smiled," or whatever it is. And I know that I received it as a man. I think there's a lot of women who I hear the stories. They get comments like that from men. I received it from women, but you know, it's this whole thing. Like if you've ever been on the receiving end of that, it's sort of like people are saying, you're wrong doing that with your face. You're not using your facial muscles in the way that I approve of. And I'm going to tell you to change how you're letting your face sit there. Like I'm not allowed to just sit here and be relaxed. I have to smile for your entertainment or because it makes you feel better. It's weird, right? So not only is it weird, it's a bit rude to just go up to someone and give, I call it unsolicited advice in a sense, or this, it's like, it's not your place, right? Let my face just be how it is. Okay. And the point, though, about this is it's not persuasive. I didn't want to smile because someone came up and goes, "You should smile." It backfires. If anything, I'd be petty enough to maybe sit there and go, you know what, I'm going to smile less just to it's to spite this person or whatever. And I tell this story because there was a guy, his name's Kim, and he was a master of hypnotherapy, NLP, persuasion, influence, and he actually got me to smile more. And he didn't do it by going up to me and telling me to smile. Now, he had a whole story. I'm not going to get into it. He had a playful thing. I'm not going to say exactly what he said. It might be a little risque, but it was something to the effect of he said something. I smiled and he goes, "There it is," like pointing out my smile. And I'll just say he said, the ladies would like that if you smiled. That's not exactly what he said, but it was kind of like a playful thing, appealing to me as a guy who, okay, yeah, I want the ladies to like me. And then he talked about his own personal experience where he would do videos because he had saw one of my videos and saw that I kind of had that serious expression. And so he was talking about his own thing with that. He's like, yeah, this, really serious face and how he kind of worked through it and in the impact that it had. Well, by hearing him tell that story and by his whole approach and demeanor and the rapport that we had and my respect for him, I started going, yeah, I could smile a little more in my videos. Right. So for years, decades of my life, even since I was a kid, I've had random people tell me to smile for whatever reason. Here's the one that actually made the difference. And it's not by taking that forceful approach. Okay. So this is one of the things that I have an issue with the grammar police is not that they're wrong about the grammar issue. It's the way that they're going up to people, a lot of times either being insulting about it or heavy handed and not realizing that that's only going to just in many cases piss people off. I'm a health guy. I'm a health nut. I've done health coaching. I would never go up to someone in the grocery store, look at what's in their shopping cart and be like, that's really bad for you. That's a bunch of preservatives. You shouldn't get that. You should get that. Who would do that? It's so socially awkward. It's socially unintelligent, right? It might be medically, factually, scientifically correct to say that one food is healthier for you than another. Yet we realize that you don't go up and just tell random strangers that. Reminds me of another video I saw where there's this professional golfer, a woman on the driving range. She's hitting the golf balls, and then a guy comes up to her. And I don't want to make this about gender. All people can deal with unsolicited feedback. This happens though sometimes, and I think for women dealing with a guy who's maybe trying to flirt with her or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, you know what you need to do? You can hit it farther. You need to swing faster or whatever." And she's like, "I'm working on a swing change." He's like, "Well, I've been playing golf for all these years or whatever." He doesn't know she's a professional golfer. And then so she almost to appease him, she swings faster and he's like, see, look how much farther it went, right? And the whole thing was, people had mixed opinions on it. And to me, I'm like, you don't just go up and give unsolicited feedback. If you want to help someone, you could ask, hey, would you like a tip on that? Or, hey, what are you working on? Oh, you're working on a swing change? Keep doing what you're doing. You do want to practice it slower. When you just come up and presume to know what someone's doing, you offer them this advice they didn't ask for. It's just not a good approach. It rarely, if ever, works. And even if someone does take the advice, a lot of times it's mixed with resentment. Okay. So why do I share all this? What does this have to do with you being an author or things like that? One of the things to realize is that so much of business is actually about your relationship skills, is about your emotional intelligence, more so than crafting in a typo-free sentence, which is, of course, still going to be generally important. And so I see people do this, and I just sitting there going, you can be correct, and yet your approach just, I don't want to do business with you. I don't even want you as my customer. I don't want to do that because they just have that, lack of awareness around this sort of stuff. And I also want to record videos like this to help raise awareness around it and having people be more mindful because you can be very well-meaning. I've certainly fallen into it. I just put myself in a position of being a coach. So I get to give advice and feedback, but I'm getting paid for it. So it's okay. And the people ask for it. So it's like you can correct someone's grammar all day if you just become an editor. Then you get to have fun and get paid to do it. So that's sort of the lesson here is that you can put yourself in a position to do those things, or you can ask someone if they would like feedback. Going and trying to force it on people, many times it can backfire. And that's one of the deeper psychological lessons here, right? Now, if we go into this next part, the person who sent the message and said, the way I handle potential customers who seem upset, and in your case, as an example, is to be humble, thanking her for sharing her perspective on your use of street language, that it came across as offensive to her, that it was not the intent. And this is a very solid approach. The thank you for sharing your perspective, right? Great thing. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your perspective. The it's not my intent is another sort of go-to line. That wasn't my intention. Because some people are judging by the intention. Now, will that always work? Not necessarily, right? There are certain people who will take advantage of that approach. For the most part, though, if I were to teach a company customer service, right, a big company, I probably wouldn't say, hey, be a smartass to people. I would likely say, acknowledge their feelings. I'm sorry you feel that way, or whatever it is, or man, that seems really tough having to go through that. Have some empathy for what they're going through and practice de-escalation techniques, right? Kill them with kindness. And this is something I did this firsthand. I worked hospitality industry at hotels, valet parking cars, a restaurant, delivery jobs, a lot of things where I was customer service and hospitality. I remember one day I was doing a valet parking job at a restaurant. And I remember some guy comes out, and I don't have the exact details, but he was kind of upset. Oh, I need my car, waiting, and he could see us kind of a line. And he was a little rude, right, in his attitude or tonality. Remember, it's just very calm, and I appreciate it, sir. I know you want to get out of here. We're going to get to your car as quickly as we can safely. We got to take care of these other cars, and we really want to get you out of here as fast as possible, right? Now, I don't know if that's what I said exactly, but the idea was he was kind of coming at me a little hostile, and it's just water off a duck's back. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's frustrating having to wait for these cars. I don't blame you. Let me see what we can do to get you taken care of as quickly as possible. And I could tell he kind of softened a little bit. And then when I got him his car, his whole demeanor changed. I don't know if he apologized. He certainly had more, he might have tipped. Well, something to me, I remember indicated that he kind of almost recognized, oh, I'm kind of being a jerk here. Like this person who's trying to help me, they're very kind, and maybe I was a little harsh. So it's a great way to reflect back to people. Sometimes instead of giving them a dose of their own medicine, show them what the opposite looks like, and then they reflect on themselves that, oh, actually, I guess that was kind of harsh. This person's actually seems like a very genuine, kind-hearted person, and here I was insulting them. Right. So that is a very valid approach, and one that I typically would default to. Most of my responses, and I'll cover some different responses, are either just ignore it. And that's probably one of the best go-to responses. Someone sends you a mean message or whatever, delete it, archive it, whatever, unsubscribe the person, block them if you need to, move on with your life. Right. And that's what I could have done here. I'll explain why I didn't in a moment. For you, though, that might be the path that you choose to take. Ignore, block, unsubscribe, or Thank you for sharing. Wish you the best. Thank you for sharing. Wasn't my intention. Appreciate you bringing that up. And then you just move on with your life. And as the person said, they can't really use that response against you. In fact, they might use it against themselves to go, wow, it's kind of a jerk to this person, even though they were nice. Right. Now here's the flip side, though. While I was working at a hotel, I remember I had an overnight shift, so I would do like valet parking and bell service and different things. And sometimes it was just me as the overnight person. Sometimes there'd be another person working with me. And one night I had a guy, I think his name was Jonathan, and so he was working with me. And a big name band at the time came in, and we didn't get the message. Jonathan got called to go out and meet them out front. They're on their tour bus and getting off. And I heard this after the fact that Jonathan came to me. He's like, and that manager just like ripped into me. He's like, "Where were you? You were supposed to be here. I'm gonna get you fired for this." Like all that kind of stuff. And Jonathan couldn't help it. He didn't know. He didn't have the message, whatever. This person is coming in and just chewing them out. And if you've worked in customer service, you might have experienced this or you might have seen it. Some people come in and they will just rip into the wait staff, the service staff, or whatever, almost as if you're beneath me and I can just insult you and tear you apart and say whatever I need. And then you're supposed to be, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, this. And it pissed me off. I'm like, I know Jonathan, he's a good guy. Like, well, what happens from the hotel's perspective? What does the hotel typically do in a situation like this? Oh, we're so sorry for the inconvenience. What can we do to make it right for you? And I just remember thinking, I would so much rather have them be like, hey, you're absolutely right. It was we dropped the ball on this. At the same time, you should not be talking to our employees that way. That's disrespectful. We don't tolerate that. Right? If someone comes in and hear these stories about certain people with certain celebrities who come in and are being really rude to the wait staff or whatever, if I were the owner of one of those restaurants, I just want to be like, I don't care who you are. You don't come in and talk to our staff that way. You're not welcome here. I don't care how much money you want to spend with us. We don't want you here coming in and insulting our staff like that. Right? That's what I wish more businesses did. Instead, some people have this customer is always right entitlement attitude. And all I can think of is they must have gotten away with it. It must be that so many people just give in to them. They apologize. They cater to this person where they can go around just bossing people around, being rude, being disrespectful, and they get away with it. And that just pisses me off. It's like they're being rewarded for their bad behavior. So one of the things that I appreciate about being in business is it's not one or the thing or the other. There's a yin yang kind of balance here. I like the fact that you can set boundaries. You can decide we don't want you as a customer. Customer is not always right. The customer is on matters of basic human decency isn't always going to be right. And so there's this element of being able to recognize that it's not always about being nice or just, oh, thank you for that. Oh, I'm so sorry for that, or whatever it is. It can lead to too much people pleasing, too much letting go of your own boundaries and letting people walk all over you. Right. And so that could be a problem. And again, I don't like bringing gender into this too much. I do feel like, though, that's been something that's been worse for women who have kind of been forced into this. Don't piss people off. Sometimes it's a survival standpoint. You make someone mad, they might attack you or whatever. So learn to be nice and to not ruffle any feathers and things. And so, yeah, there's a strategy to that in a sense. There's also a strategy, though, to having the ability, if necessary, to lay down boundaries and sometimes do things that some people might even consider rude. A perfect example of this. Someone I used to think was so mean as a kid is Judge Judy. And I've just gotten on a Judge Judy kick recently where I've been like almost every day, I'm watching some Judge Judy videos. And now I love Judge Judy. Sometimes she gets some stuff wrong. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that is a little harsh. A lot of times, though, I'm like, yeah, she just doesn't put up with people's nonsense. And you can tell there's some people who go on Judge Judy who they've apparently never had anyone hold them to a certain standard or call them out on their, whatever. And I like that if you think about her role as a judge, that's a position where you got to have a certain sternness. You got to have an ability to kind of teach people through a little bit of tough love, if you will. And so that to me, I think about that almost as an archetype of the judge, or, drill sergeant might be a little excessive. But the idea that there are certain roles where kindness and being really polite isn't always the best approach. I don't get this confused and think I'm telling you should be mean to people, you should act like Judge Judy or like a drill sergeant. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying though is niceness, kindness, being polite has its place. It's a good default setting. It's just not always the best approach. Sometimes the best approach is a simple saying of, "Hey, that was very disrespectful," or setting a boundary, saying, "Hey, I don't tolerate people talking like that. I'm going to unsubscribe you," or, there's the door. If we go back to a comedian could tear down a heckler. A comedian can also just say, "Hey, look, we don't tolerate that here. There's the door. Get out, or we'll have security take you out." Right. And to me, that was a little closer to the approach that I took, which is being playful, but then saying, look, if someone doesn't like this, if they're offended by it, then they're not really part of my intended audience. Okay. Now, how should you respond? And I can't really answer that. It's partly going to depend on your approach, but it doesn't have to be either, "Oh, I'm sorry," or "Thank you for sharing," which again, that is actually typically my default approach. If I don't just ignore it altogether, there's a couple other things you might do. One question I really like is just actually posing it back to them, and that is, "What do you hope to get out of this?" Or, "What was the purpose in sending me this?" Sometimes if I feel a person might have some self-awareness and empathy, I might go, "How would you feel if someone sent you this?" That's not going to work for everyone. Yet some people might have enough self-reflection to go, "Oh yeah, maybe I was a little bit harsh." Right. I could, if they're accusing me of being offensive, I could say, "I do find it offensive, the tone that you took with this." Right. You're just kind of putting it back on them. But instead of accusing them, just saying, "I found it offensive," making it more of a personal feeling type of thing. So there's a number of different approaches. And again, most people probably better off just ignoring and blocking most cases. Probably better off just thanking people, just like the person said, taking the humble approach. "Thank you for sharing your perspective." To me, though, there are times where I'm like, I don't actually thank you for this approach. I don't want to even feed into it. But why respond at all? That's the next part. This is another question I got. And there's a few reasons why I did choose to engage with this person in Respond in the first place. So the first thing is pure self-serving entertainment. I thought it'd be kind of fun. It's a form of, like, if you get a lot of messages each day, "I lost my login information. How do I get access to this? Where can I purchase this?" Just kind of everyday stuff. It's fine. It's just sort of neutral. Okay, checking the emails, responding, dealing with customer service. And every now and then you get either like a really positive, "You changed my life," and I'm like, "Yay, it feels really good." Or you get a message like that person sent, which to me, sometimes I do get upset by those things. It does rub me the wrong way. I'm not going to pretend like I have such thick skin that it never bothers me. In this case, it was like, is this person joking? It's so ridiculous that I was like, okay, let's have some fun with this. So what's a kind of a silly response that I can give? So it was partly self-entertainment. Another thing though is this idea of testing the waters. And um, what I mean by that is, first of all, are they joking? Let me throw a little bit of a playful response and see if they come back with, "Oh, haha, yeah, it's just messing with you." Or are they being more serious? That's one way of testing the waters. Another thing about testing the waters is this is important when it comes to life in general. This is a life lesson, something I've had to learn, continue to learn, is that there's some people out there where we're all wearing masks to a degree, right? We all have masks. And the example I heard Chase Hughes talk about is, like, have you ever held in a fart? Right? Like, maybe you're not being totally authentic. Like, if you've held in a fart because social norms are like, "I'm going to kind of pretend like I don't have to, whatever right now." That's just part of living in society. So we all present a certain image. I'm doing it right now. We're always doing it at times. Um, and so the thing is, though, some people, they have a mask where they're really hiding. It's a very wolf in sheep's clothing type of mask. And what I mean by that is, I had a guy who reached out to me years ago, some sort of business opportunity. And I looked at it and I seriously considered it. And I ultimately decided to pass on it. And I remember, I'm sure I said something polite, like, "This isn't a fit for me," or "I'm going to pass on that," or whatever. And he came back with something along the lines of, "Oh, I thought you'd be smart enough to realize what a good opportunity it was. I guess I was wrong." That type of like snarky thing. And I remember thinking, "Ooh, I made the right decision telling this person no. What if I would have gone into business with them?" Right? That's not the kind of person I want to go into business with. Yet I never would have, well, I don't say never. I wouldn't have realized it at first, though, had I said yes. right? It's kind of like someone might seem really polite and nice, but then you reject them, and then all of a sudden it's like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. How dare you? What's wrong with you? Blah, and you're like, oh man, like you really set the person off. Yet some people, they're going to act very nice and they're going to act very friendly until the moment you say something that really triggers them, and then they lash out at you, right? Now, if you're human, just about everyone gets upset with rejection, might have some response, might be upset, but that attack, going on the attack, is something to watch out for. Certain psychopathic people, narcissistic people, people with, personality disorders and stuff, they can fake, being a, really kind, caring person until something, sets them off. So it's important to be able to kind of suss these people out. Now, I'm not saying I was thinking this person or anyone I'm dealing with is a psychopath or narcissistic personality. That's not the point in this context for this specific email. This is more in general, having the ability to recognize a lot of people are going to be on their best behavior, and you don't always know how they're going to really be until there's a little provocation of some sort. So let me throw in a little bit of humor. Let me throw in a little bit of playfulness. Let me just be a little whatever and see how they respond to it. Right. So testing the waters. And the third thing is, as it was happening, I'm like, this is probably going to make an email that I share with other people. Generally, I don't want to get in long conversations like that in private because no one else can benefit from learning from it. I do respect, general privacy. I didn't mention the person's name or their website or anything like that. The thing was, though, as this person sent me this initial email, I could already tell this will probably turn into something. And sure enough, it did. And it became, a big, got a big response. I think a lot of people were entertained by it. I hope there's also some educational value, at the very least, at least some entertainment, right? Again, like a comedian that's roasting a heckler or something. It's fun to watch either way. And so that's something else that I was thinking about, that this could turn into a lesson. And there's a feeling of like, I want to see where this goes. Curiosity, and because it can become entertainment, education, and also another piece of content to curate my audience. So if I put this email out, this response email about, hey, this is what this person sent me and how I responded and how they responded and kind of what it looked like, and sort of take you behind the scenes, then some people are going to agree with my approach. Some people are going to be like, I really don't like Derek's attitude. I don't agree with him at all. And that's further curation of going, okay, I don't like Derek's attitude, or, oh yeah, I'm totally with Derek on that, or anything between. Maybe it just provokes your own thoughts, right? It's not even about agreeing or disagreeing, just food for thought through the experience. So I was going through it with an element of content creation in mind. Right. So that's one of the reasons why I responded, rather than what I do probably 95, 99% of the time, which is either say nothing or just some sort of thank you for sharing. Appreciate your response. And then just, move on with life. Now, going back to the comment that said you might have gained a loyal subscriber rather than lose one, or at least you would have no ammunition to use in furthering a negative viewpoint of you. So on that last point, I get what you're saying. I wouldn't have given this person ammunition. Forgive the graphic example. They would have pulled ammunition out of their ass if they needed to. There will be people who, if they want ammunition against you, they will take something you said out of context. They'll distort something that you said. They'll pick see these comments, the gap in a guy's teeth is a reason to not like them, whatever it is. If someone wants to be offended, they'll find a reason. And that was what I was sensing with this person. And sure enough, it wasn't actually my response that seemed to offend them. It was a later email about the grammar police that really offended them. So I could identify pretty early on, this is someone who is going to choose to be offended by something. And there's no way I can guarantee every email I sent out is going to be to their liking. It's the same thing for you. If you say something, the most innocuous thing, it will probably offend someone. If you didn't say something that someone thought you should have said, they might be offended. If you said something they completely agree with, yet they misread the context or whatever, they will find a way to do it. So there are some people who they're going to have ammunition to use against you. And that kind of goes back to this idea that you can't please everyone. Not only that, there's some people I don't believe she ever would have become a loyal customer, nor do I want her as a loyal customer. That might sound odd. They're really, if you've dealt with nightmare customers or people who will be a pain in your life or people who, even if you can serve them, someone else would serve them even better. It's better not to have them. Not that you can't have people be customers of multiple businesses. It's just that it's really not going to be the ideal person. Oh, and by the way, there's another thing I just remembered. One of the reasons why I responded to this person was I actually thought like 1.5% chance I might actually get through to them. I thought that my response of, hey, it's actually strategically sound to sometimes repel people who aren't a good fit. And I followed up with, wouldn't mention this, wouldn't it make sense to, if we didn't, to find out you don't jive with someone early on. It reminds me of a comment I saw in a forum about someone saying, well, do you need to cuss? And they weren't talking to me because I don't tend to cuss much socially, in private, playing video games, stubbing my toe. You might hear some colorful language, but, out my content doesn't really have a lot of cussing. Yet I'm totally fine with it. And I'll bring on speakers and people who do, and it's fine with me. If the person was saying, oh, do you need to use this cussing in your outreach message to this person? And what I remember thinking is, I get the idea of not needlessly offending someone. What I thought, though, was for context, this person had an outreach message inviting someone to like a mastermind event, and it kind of used some colorful language. I remember thinking, well, if you're going to go to a mastermind event with someone and that person likes to cuss and has a certain kind of crass sense of humor, wouldn't you rather know that before you spend 3 days with them? Right? And in this context, the person was actually sending a direct message, and they knew that the person used that kind of language as well. So they were sort of on the same page and rapport with that. But the idea of like, yes, sometimes you want to hold back the fart, so to speak. You don't want to needlessly bother someone with something noxious. At the same time, there's something to be said for being like, hey, here's who I am. These are some of my beliefs. These are some of my philosophies. I'm not a particularly political person, yet if you're in a political ideology or something, you might not, you might just be like, hey, this is my political ideology or whatever. And if you're not going to jive with that, maybe we're not the best fit, whatever it is, right? So are you in the don't talk about religion and politics camp? That's a little bit more where I'm at because it just doesn't seem relevant to what I do, nor is it a particular thing that I'm trying to like impose on anyone. For other people, though, I might say maybe it makes sense for you to talk about that because you really want to attract that type of person in your tribe. And that's where there's a bigger picture strategy of understanding what's right for you and realizing you don't always want everyone to be a customer, right? So if we go really deep in this, there are some people, as I mentioned, there are some psychopathic people, some, people who actually intend to do harm. And I had a friend, and she's still a friend, who she's learned a lot over the years. She was so much like the very nice, I want to be friends with everyone, very much people pleaser, had a hard time saying no, setting boundaries. And what happened is she naturally attracted some people who were legitimate psychopathic people. I don't mean that as a figure of speech. I mean, they lacked empathy. They got off on harming people. If they saw that someone was a good, kind-hearted, nice person, they saw a target. It was like blood in the water for sharks. They saw someone that they could take advantage, someone that they could use, someone that they knew probably wouldn't put up a fight. Right. So this isn't me saying going out there and, put up walls and just, keep everyone away. It's me as saying, recognizing there's something to be said for being a little mindful that there are some people out there who don't always have the best intentions, and kindness doesn't win them over. And ideally, you can avoid them altogether. At least, do what you can to weed them out. And if I felt like I was dealing with that person, especially in person, I might choose to just ignore them or disengage or not even, poke at them for risk of upsetting them. Either way, though, the idea is being mindful that you truly don't want everyone as a loyal customer. You don't want everyone in your life. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir. Maybe that's an obvious thing. And it's something because I see messages like this and I really appreciate where the person is coming from. What I want to remind people of is if there's a bias in favor of attracting people and in favor of winning people over, while that's generally good, you want to counterbalance it to a degree with who do I really not want in my life? Who do I want to keep away? Who do I not act super friendly with because maybe they're going to take advantage of that? And so I don't believe you have to shut down and become untrusting of everyone, but I also don't think you want to trust everyone either. There's a balancing act, right? So I'm not the expert on all dealing with psychopaths and narcissists and terrible people. I'm very grateful I haven't had to deal with that much at all in my life. I have heard some of the horror stories though, and it's made me aware of it. It's something I continue to think about and reflect on and learn about because I do have a sort of an increased appreciation for that, to be mindful. And I tend to be very trusting myself. And I realize that, you can get take advantage of with that. And so I don't believe the answer is to just not trust anyone. I do also think it's important, though, to recognize this, recognize your biases. Are you very much in favor of pushing people away or bringing everyone in? Either one of those could cause an issue. How do you find the balance, the harmony? And I don't think there's an exact nicely packed little secret answer that I can give you, or at least I don't have it. It's something that I believe in being aware of and lifelong learner in those regards. So a lot of thoughts. As you can see, we went pretty deep in some different things here. Love to know your thoughts. Love to know your comments. What did this bring up for you? I imagine there's plenty of things you could say. Well, Derek, what about this or what about that? Or you didn't catch this or you missed the point on that or whatever. And, as long as you're respectful, you're welcome to share some of your thoughts and bring in some other ideas here, because this is something we could spend days exploring these different topics. So with that, hope you got some interesting insights, some food for thought here. Maybe all of this was just a repetition of things you already know. And sometimes repetition, though, is the best thing to remind you of what you already know and keep it at the top of your mind. So with that, wishing you the best. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts.